Hi guys, so I'm doing something a little different today, and this was actually requested by a sub, and I've had the idea to do it for quite a while. All the ways, all the ways to support her down below. There's merchandise, there's the Otter Spirit bracelets, everything that you do to help supports this channel, and also help support the search dogs that I'm trying to train. But just liking and subscribing and being here is fine. But I do want to warn you that this might get this is going to be viewer discretion advised. I might be careful of the way that I say things, but this is going to be. I'm going to read the documents for Katie Johnson, Jane Doe. It's something criminal. Um, if any true crime channels cared about it, they'd be covering it. I don't think a lot of people have read it themselves, and I know that people might not believe it, and I really don't care. I stand for victims, and I believe in what she's saying. Her story's never changed, not one bit, and it makes sense because he's friends with the guy. He went to the parties. I mean, come on. It's not really that far-fetched. Um, and she was only 13 years old at the time. So I think it's important for people to know this if they don't already know it. And I don't think people take the time to read the actual documents, to read the court documents on it. And yes, she got extremely scared because I put this in the criminal video that I did. She was being harassed and threatened, and Donald even threatened her. So, I mean, if you were a young girl and you were getting all the threats from everywhere, you would probably withdraw too. Plus, I think there was something outside of court that was taken care of, like most of his stuff. But so again, this isn't really a psychic thing, but this is something criminal, and this is something I think people should know. And like I said, I felt the pull to do it for a while. If you don't want to watch it, you don't have to watch it. If you'd rather go read the documents yourself, you're more than welcome to do that. A lot of people don't. Somebody said that they would really like me to do this on the live, so I'm doing it for them and anybody else that doesn't really want to read it but would like to know or isn't aware of it. So that's the whole point of this. All right. So this is actually case 116 CV-07673-RA. Document 4, filed 10/3/16. There are 10 pages of the document. I think there might be more that was filed against Epstein himself. This was against Donald J. Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. This is a complaint for rape. Rape, sexual misconduct, criminals, sexual acts, sexual abuse, forcible touching, assault, battery, and intentional and reckless infliction of emotional distress, duress, false imprisonment, and defamation. So, again, viewer discretion is advised, and this is to show a criminal pattern. If you watch Eugene Curl and that whole thing too, there's a criminal pattern here that I think people need to realize. And I think it's important if you need to know somebody, you need to know all the facts and what was put out there. And her story. This is about her story. So let's see here. You can look this up yourself as well. All you gotta do is Google it. It'll pop up. So plaintiff was subject to acts of rape, sexual misconduct, criminal sexual acts, sexual abuse, forcible touching, assault, battery, intentional and reckless infliction of emotional distress, duress, false imprisonment, and threats of death and or serious bodily injury by defendants that took place on several parties during the summer months of 1994. The parties were held by defendant Epstein at New York City residence that was being used by defendant Epstein at 9 East 71st Street in Manhattan. During this period, plaintiff was a minor age of 13 and was legally incapable under New York law of consenting to sexual intercourse and the other sexual detailed herein. New York Penal L 130.053A. The rapes in the first, second, and third degree, sexual misconduct, criminal sexual acts in the first, second, and third degree, sexual abuse in the first, second, and third degree, and forcible touching, and on information and belief, predatory sexual assault. Detailed herein are lawful under New York law, e.g. New York Penal Code 130.20-130.52. Do I need to read all that? No, I don't. Those are all the numbers. And constitute the torts of inter alia assault, battery, false imprisonment, and intentional or reckless infliction of emotional distress, including threats of force and bodily harm, under New York law. In addition, 18 U.S. Code 2255 provides plaintiff with civil remedy for personal injuries because plaintiff was a minor, was a victim of violations of 18 U.C. um, 1591, 2421, 2422B, 2423A, and she suffered personal injury as a result of such violations. Declaration of Plaintiff Jane Doe, Exhibit A here too. Declaration of Tiffany Doe, Exhibit B here too. Declaration of Joan Doe, Exhibit C here too. Jane Doe, Tiffany Doe, and Joan Doe are each um, pseudonymous as each woman wishes anonymity. Tiffany Doe, a witness, was an employer of defendant Epstein. Exhibit B. Jane Doe, a witness, was a childhood classmate of plaintiff who, in 1994-95 school year, was told by plaintiff that plaintiff was subject to sexual contact by defendant at parties in New York City during the summer of 1994. Exhibit C. Courts have discretion to allow proceeding anonymously where the need for privacy outweighs the public interest in showing their identity and any prejudice to the defendants. Second, sealed plaintiff versus sealed defendant, 537 F 3D 185 189, 2D Sir 2008. This litigation involves matters that are highly sensitive and of a personal nature, and identification of plaintiff would pose a risk of retaliatory physical harm to her and others. Exhibit A, all of the 10 factors that the second court articulated as relevant to the analysis favor anonymity, especially factors 1 through 4, 7, and 10. Factors 1 and 2, whether the litigation involves matters are highly sensitive and of a personal nature, and whether identification poses a risk, retaliatory, physical, or mental harm to the parties seeking to proceed anonymously, or even more critically, to innocent non-parties, or are neutral with respect to anonymity. Protecting plaintiff anonymity is also appropriate as she's a rape victim. Plaintiff was entitled by promises of money and a modeling career to attend a series of parties with other similar situated minor females held in New York City residence that was being used by defendant Jeffrey Epstein. At least 4 of the parties were attended by defendant Trump. Exhibit A and B. On information and belief, by this time in 1994, defendant Trump had known defendant Epstein for 7 years. New York, 10/28/02. I've known Jeff for 15 years. Terrific guy. Trump booms from a speakerphone. He is a lot of fun to be with. It is even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side. No doubt about it. Jeffrey enjoys his social life. And knew the plaintiff was then just 13 years old. Exhibit A and B. Defendant Trump initiated sexual contact with plaintiff at 4 different parties. On the 4th and final sexual encounter with defendant Trump tied plaintiff to a bed, exposed himself to plaintiff, and then proceeded to forcibly RAPE plaintiff. During the course of this savage sexual attack, plaintiff loudly pleaded with defendant Trump to stop, but with no effect. Defendant Trump responded to plaintiff's pleas by violently striking plaintiff in the face with his open hand and screaming that he would do whatever he wanted. Exhibit A and B. Immediately following this rape, defendant Trump threatened plaintiff that if she to ever reveal any of the details of the sexual and physical abuse of her by Donald Trump, or defendant Trump, plaintiff and her family would be physically harmed if not killed. Exhibit A and B. Defendant Epstein had sexual contact with plaintiff at 2 of the parties. The second sexual encounter with defendant Epstein took place after plaintiff had been raped by defendant Trump. Defendant Epstein forced himself upon plaintiff and proceeded to rape her anally and vaginally despite her loud pleas to stop. Defendant Epstein then attempted to strike plaintiff about the head with his closed fist while she angrily screamed at plaintiff that he, defendant Epstein, rather than defendant Trump, should have been the one who took plaintiff's virginity before plaintiff finally managed to break away from defendant Epstein. Exhibit A and B. The threats of violence against plaintiff and her family continued, this time from defendant Epstein, who again reiterated that plaintiff was not to reveal any of the details of this sexual and physical abuse, or else specifically plaintiff and her family would be seriously physically harmed if not killed. Exhibit A and B. While still under threats of physical harm by coming forward and having no reason to believe that the threats have ever been lifted or would never be lifted, plaintiff, who has suffered from stress, emotional distress, mental pain, and suffering, among other problems, ever since the assaults, was subject to daily painful reminders of the horrific acts of one of the perpetrators, defendant Trump, via mass media coverage of him starting on or about June 16th, 2015, that over a short period of time became a continuous and unavoidable. Just like I said in my thing, imagine everybody loving your rapist. How do you think she feels? How do you think all of them feel? As a direct proximate result of the sexual assaults and rapes perpetrated by defendants upon her, plaintiff has suffered stress, emotional distress, mental pain, and suffering, as well as diverse physical consequences. And as direct proximate result of the sexual assaults and rapes perpetrated by defendants upon her, plaintiff has suffered physical pain and suffering. As a direct proximate result of the sexual assault and rapes perpetrated by defendant upon her, plaintiff has been subject to the public scorn, hatred, and ridicule, and has suffered threats against her life and physical safety. Freaking sad, dude. We should be standing for her, not this guy. As a direct and proximate result of the sexual assaults and rapes perpetrated by defendants upon her, plaintiff has incurred special damages, including medical and legal expenses. The sexual assaults and rapes perpetrated by defendant upon plaintiff are intentional acts. The conduct of defendants demonstrates willful, reckless, and intentional conduct that raises a conscious indifference to the consequences. At the appropriate time in this litigation, plaintiff shall amend her complaint to assert a claim for punitive damage against defendants in order to punish defendants for their actions and deter defendants from repeating their conduct, which of course didn't happen. Any statute of limitations applicable to rape, sexual misconduct, criminal sexual acts, sexual abuse, forcible touching, assault, battery, intentional, reckless infliction of emotional distress, false imprisonment of a minor, if any, is told owing to the continuous active stress imposed upon plaintiff by defendants that effectively robbed plaintiff of her free will to continue legal action until present time. Colin versus Maragata, 811 F 2D 698, 722, Second Circuit, 1987. Ross versus United States, 574 F Sup 536, 542, SDNY, 1983. More particularly, plaintiff was unrelentingly threatened by each defendant that she ever revealed any of the details of sexual and physical abuse caused by her defendants. Plaintiff and her family would be physically harmed if not killed. The duress has not terminated and fear not subsided. The duress is an element or inherent or underlying causes of action complained of herein. The duress and coercion exerted by defendants has been such as to have actually deprives plaintiff of her freedom and will to institute a suit earlier in time, and it rose to such a level that the person of reasonable fairness in the plaintiff's situation would have been unable to resist. Exhibits A and B. Both defendants let plaintiff know that each was very wealthy, powerful man, and indicated that they had the power, ability, and means to carry out their threats. Indeed, defendant Trump stated that plaintiff should ever say anything if she didn't want to disappear, like Maria, a 12-year-old female that was forced to be involved in the third incident with defendant Trump, and that plaintiff had not seen since that third incident, and that he was capable of having her whole family killed. Duress had prevented plaintiff from starting litigation before this year. However, as soon as she surfaced, she received threats. More specifically, shortly after her first complaint was filed in California on April 26, 2016, she started receiving threatening phone calls on her cell phone. Defendants equitably stopped from arguing that any statute of limitations has not been told, as defendants wrongfully forced plaintiff to refrain from timely commencing this action by threats, duress, and misconduct. Exhibit A and B, Zimmerman versus Poly Prep, Country Day School. And then it lists the cases of the sites. Wrongdoers should not be able to take refuge behind the shield of his own wrongdoing. Moreover, this action has been brought before the facts giving rise to the estoppel have ceased to the operational, while still under threats of physical harm, by coming forward and having no reason to believe that the threats have ever been lifted or would ever be lifted. And since plaintiff has decided to seek redress at this time, plaintiff seeks an order of protection in favor of plaintiff and all associated with her, as to protect them from harm and harassment from defendants and their agents and associates. On information behalf, or on about April 28, 2016, defendant Trump provided the following statement to the American media and in our Radar Online LLC for publication at least their website, radaronline.com, regarding plaintiff's complaint filed in the United States District Court on the Central District, California. The allegations are not only categorically false, but disgusting, the highest level of clearly framed to solicit media attention, or perhaps are simply politically motivated. Good God. There is absolutely no merit or allegations, period. Well, considering he lies about everything. The statement provided publication by defendant Trump was published by the website and then been republished elsewhere in whole or a part numerous times, and similar statements of an attorney for defendant Trump were also published, including on September 22nd, 2016 by Courthouse News Service. The statements provided for publications by defendant Trump and his agent and that were published by said websites false as they pertain to plaintiff. Oh man, I'm not lying when I say that my head and my jaw hurt from reading this. Just in case nobody knows, I feel pain, people are alive or not. And I would never make that up. The statements provided for publication to defendant Trump and his agent were published by said websites false as they pertain to plaintiff. The published statements are libelous to their face and clearly expose plaintiff to hatred, contempt, ridicule, whatever. As proximate result of the above described publications, plaintiffs have suffered loss of her reputation, shame, mortification, and injury to her feelings, all the damage and the amount established by the proof of trial. I mean, don't people feel bad that they treat victims like this? It's astounding to me that this is a criminal channel and people would rather listen to him than listen to the victims. Spiritual channel, above all. If this doesn't make you mad, there's something wrong with you. As a direct proximate result of defendant Trump and defamation, and think about this. After this, then there's another pattern, E. Jean Carroll and all these women, and they all have the same stories, and they all say the same thing. It's all the same thing. I'm grabbed. I'm, forcefully touched. It's all the same. Without my permission, every single one. Those are the only ones we know about it. It's a pattern. It's all the same stories. He's just a predator. He just jumps. And he admitted it to everybody. He said, I can touch their pee whenever they want. He admitted it straight to everybody. And we have this when he's friends with Epstein. Like, for real, he was known to be with him. He was known to be his friend. He was known to hang out with him and be buddies with him. They sex trafficked someone out of Mar-a-Lago. I mean, come on. Evidence stacks up. Stories stack up. Telling me you don't believe her when her story has never changed? It's never changed. She was so scared for her life she couldn't show her face, tell her identity, hide her voice. That's complete fear. Put yourself in her shoes. Sad for a 13-year-old to go through. Can you imagine? And then watch your rapist on TV all the time and people just love him and ignore everything. It's disgusting as America. It makes me so mad because I'm for justice. I'm for the victims, and this really breaks my heart for her. And if you've never read it, then um I don't know if I read this part. Ex proximate result of above described publications, plaintiff has suffered loss to her reputation, shame, mortification, and injury to her feelings. All her damage and the amount to be established by proof at trial. The above described publications are not privileged because they were published by defendant Trump and his agent with malice, hatred, and ill will towards the plaintiff and the desire to injure her. As a direct and proximate result of defendant Trump's defamation of plaintiff has subject to public scorn, hatred, and ridicule, and has suffered other injury. And then, of course, she wanted damages and then attorney fees and a protection order. Why are you going to ask for protection order if you don't? I don't know. I don't understand how people can't believe her. She was 18 at the time she did this. She was 13 when it happened. You were 13 when that happened, and you were being threatened. I don't think you'd come forward either. Because I've had people victim in shame. And why does it take so long? Because people get scared. They think that no one's going to listen to them. You know? It's sad. But, I mean, come on. You can put two and two together. Look at who he hung out with. He obviously was at the parties. He's kind of all over the Epstein files. There's one that I brought to the attention in my criminal where he's in there. It talks about he's in there. They didn't show much in that particular one, but he was still there. He was still kind of participating, not in anything that they could charge him with, but come on, birds of a feather. You're literally hanging out at the parties, obviously. You're known as a sexual predator. Even if you don't believe these women's stories, I mean, how can you not? There's so many of them. 28 and counting. That's only the ones we know about that aren't scared. There might even be more from these parties, which I'm hoping will come out. I hope that people will get brave. So I wanted to do this because I feel like it's important for people to know about it. It's a criminal filing. It's a civil filing, but it's about something criminal. The election's coming up. I think people need to understand the criminal pattern that I'm trying to show you guys, and the pattern that we would take in any other person and look at it and be like, oh my gosh. You know what I mean? If this was filed against your neighbor, your friend, or someone that you knew, along with being held liable of sexual assault, and then all the other 26 allegations that are all very similar, with him admitting to it on TV, what would you think of that person? You sure wouldn't want him as president. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, and this is not everything that he's done. So my point is, why do people condone everything he does and put these poor women in these situations where they are ridiculing them, they're hating on them, they're scaring them to the fact that they don't even go to court? I mean, that her lawyer had to come out and say she's too scared. Can you imagine being in that situation, in those shoes? Put yourself in the victim's shoes. That's all I ask. Have some freaking compassion. So, and again, whenever I do these videos, this is to educate. Okay? You don't have to watch them, but it's here to educate you in case nobody knows about it. And in case you don't want to read it yourself. I read it straight from the documents that were filed. Nothing I've said is inaccurate. And usually I try to share facts with you guys. I don't try to push any agendas. I push Spirit's voice and I push facts, and that's it. And, you know, I see with my eyes and my mind and my spiritual sight, and I know what's good and bad. I know what's right and wrong. I know what's light and dark. I know what's good and evil. I know what's, you know, what we should have what versus what we shouldn't have. And I hope that everybody else is looking at their morals and values, and also taking a look at that and trying to see where they stand. So I appreciate you. Thank you so much. I don't even think I